District 115 High School Board of Education meeting for December 3rd, 2018. May I have a roll call vote? Roll call, please. No
Ms.
vote.
Davis? Mr. Lane?
Here.
Dr. Elliott?
Here.
Mrs. Scarling?
Here.
Mr. Markison?
Here.
Mr. Mormon?
Here.
Dr. Nemekis?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody for coming. You must have heard we weren't having a meeting next month, so you all wanted to be here before the end of the year. Just a few brief remarks before we get to the business of the day. First, you have to measure success, and in our case, that means learning. Grades and standardized tests aren't perfect measures, but they are used by colleges and other educational organizations to assess how we're doing and predict how our students will do at the next level. We're going to hear an assessment report tonight. While important and something the staff and Board of Ed take very seriously, SAT, ACT, and AP passing rates are not our only measures of success. It's important to know how we're doing as a system versus our peers. Are our students ready for the next level? But our school's AP passing rate means very little to an individual student needing AP Chem support. Providing that support and getting individual students ready for the next level of challenge and how we do that is critical to developing passionate, insightful, courageous students that will make a difference in their world. Mr. Simic is also going to discuss an early draft of a key performance indicator dashboard that this board has talked about for a while. Again, we have to measure success, and we want to agree on the important success measures. We compare ourselves to other districts, but a lot of those comps are set by others, the state, et cetera. We want to measure what this community, values in education. And the dashboard is a summary, a quick get, important but not what makes the engine pour, or in this case, it's only a part of becoming a world-class educational organization. So, Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Markison. I'll hand off to Dr. Holland to begin.
And I'll pass it to JD. Welcome back.
Student Council has been up to a lot lately. We are currently undergoing our fire relief for the California wildfires. We are collecting items that we have blasted throughout our social media, throughout the school, and we will be sending them out to fire departments in California near the areas that have been affected. The freshman and sophomore classes really tackled the stockings for displaced children, spearheaded by Mrs. Ragna. They have been putting stockings together for children that have been displaced from their homes for circumstances where they cannot be there anymore. And we have made at least over 50 stockings for the children, and it was amazing to see everyone come together and really get behind this cause. Freshmen and sophomores have had bake sale fundraisers to keep our efforts going, able to make sure we're able to pay for some of these things that we're undertaking. Adopt a Family will be coming up soon as Christmas and all the holidays are around the corner, so that will be coming up. And as a part of our communication initiative, the exec team will be at all lunches next week, willing to answer questions from the student body, and hopefully we'll get a large turnout and people will ask me some questions. That'd be nice. That's about it.
So just a couple reminders. We have our first semester exams coming up December 17th. It's our first time, as a reminder as well, that we have exams right before winter break. I will be sending out some reminders and some tips to students, staff, and our parents this week as everyone prepares for this change. We have our holiday concerts and spaghetti dinner this Sunday at 3 p.m. in the RMA. We want to encourage everyone to come out and support our students and community members who also sing in the Glee Club. We are preparing for our second annual dance marathon. Last year, Thomas Dixon came and presented here at the board. The focus last year was primarily on supporting research regarding cystic fibrosis. This year, the focus is on suicide prevention. The dance marathon will be here at West Campus on January 12th, and we're encouraging all students to sign up, hopefully this month or as soon as possible. Get ready to party. It's not really a marathon. It's from 10:30 to 2:30, but it's a lot of fun. Thank you.
So I want to have a brief presentation of the culmination of a great deal of work. The board has asked this past year for the administration to create a recommended set of key performance indicators, things that are specific and measurable, and as Mr. Markison said, things that reflect our values across our district. And I wanted to show you a draft of this dashboard that we have now created. So beginning here with attendance is one of the first rules of life, is one of the most important things is showing up. And so we have attendance rate there, and thanks to the work of Dr. Holland and our staff throughout the building, we now have quality attendance data across all grade levels, and that's one of the things that we expect that we should be measuring. Graduation rate obviously is a significant outcome. SAT, there are two parts to our student growth, our student achievement data. One is we want to have a attainment, so did students at least get to a certain level? And then we also wanted to have another measure, which was how did every student individually do? So there are many students that when they walk in the door, they will be successful no matter what we do with them almost, and they'll pass every test we give them, but whether or not they grow or not as individuals is a very different question. Also very important to us is extracurricular participation, that as many students as possible, every student that isn't a caregiver for a family member or isn't required to work, for example, that those students participate in co and extracurricular. We have these broken down by our milestones. This first group are milestones 1 through 3, and then 4 is the milestone on talent, teacher retention, and professional development satisfaction. So that is staff satisfaction for the training that they get. 5 are our partnerships, career and community connections. We have an increasing number of students that are participating in things like open doors and other things. And our connectedness and our engagement of our parents and our staff. So we're going to use the Comprehensive School Climate Indicator as a measure for that. And then milestone 6, and this reflects some of the feedback that we've gotten so far. A couple board members have said, you know, look, I would really like to see something that is graphic here, so this folds that in. All of this work is iterative, so this is partway through the draft here. So we have connectedness and engagement for students, and then also importantly, respect for diversity for our students and our parents and our staff, so that we have all of our important groups represented there. This last one, respect for diversity, is one of the reasons that we settled on that, was that we know from our various surveys that we have certain student populations that are particularly vulnerable, LGBTQ, anybody that identifies as that. And the best indicator that we have found to measure that is the level of respect for diversity on the CSCI. A little bit of how this works: you can hover over any of these and drill down into them. You can see what our graduation rate looks for, and you can do that for every part of this. And we also have another segment for other indicators, so we're trying to limit the number of things on the dashboards. That is, the idea of a car dashboard is that you can look down and very quickly get an understanding of, okay, so how's the car doing? How fast am I going, and do I have gas and whatnot? So it's meant to, this initial landing page is where most folks, we believe, are going to land. But the purpose of the presentation is to first show what this draft looks like, and then very importantly, get whatever feedback from board members who have had a cursory look at this already for how this works or does not work for them in particular. So with that, I'll take whatever questions and feedback you have regarding it.
Questions, thoughts?
I have one question on milestone 5, the partnership, the connectedness and engagement. There's that 3.86, which is the CSCI. And on 6, you gave us a target of
Yes, we do. It's a very good question, and that will be some of the, will be folded into our next iteration of this, because I think the point is, okay, 3.86, what does that mean, and what are we trying to strive for, and why is it important? And for each of these, down below, there's a brief, we have a certain number of characters that you can use to describe why is this of importance, and we'll have things like that in there. So great, thank you. One difference, if you're looking at District 67 and 115, one of the differences in the representation is that 67 really wanted to have 7, absolutely no more than 7, and they did not want them linked to the milestones. So that was that board's direction, and our board, we as administrators are very comfortable with the milestone. That's what we drive everything else with. And so we like that, but the 67 group said, no, we want to eliminate that and just go with the 7 indicators.
I'm a huge believer in visual performance management, so this makes a lot of sense to me, although as we talked about, I need what flags as being out of whack, and using either colors or some other indicator to draw the attention, I think is important. And part of it is to give comparisons. Where was it last year? What's our target? What's the difference? It's one of the things that has been done particularly well, I think, in the work that Jen's team has done on the financial indicators. You guys have some metrics that give you sort of a half moon with where you are on the, with an arrow. So all in all, I think this is great work. One of the things that we realized, particularly when we brought on ECRA, was how much work every year was being done manually to create reports. And there was no capture of data in such a way that it became automatic, or a lot of it was an automatic feed. Based on what you guys are putting up here, how burdensome is the data collection, and how much of it is truly automatic and is drawing on resources that you already have in place? How much are we creating work for you versus how much of this is just reflecting the data that's going by in your world?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Our attendance rate is ongoing work. Our graduation rate is something that we already do. The SAT overall meets, and our local growth, that is work that is very important to us that we're doing on an ongoing basis with ECRA. The extracurricular participation, the infrastructure, Dr. Holland and her team have put a tremendous amount of work into that, and now that the structure is created, there is some additional work, and I'll let her comment on that in just a moment here. But the talent, teacher retention is relatively straightforward. Professional development, we're going to have to create a survey for that. 67 created that, so we're able to model that off of their surveys, and the others are not unduly burdensome either. So the last two, for example, are straight off the CSCI, and we intentionally, part of the struggle with the CSCI is it is like an entire waterfront of information, and so we intentionally drilled down into 2 specific areas. But Dr. Holland, if you want to add anything to that.
It's really a combination with the creation of the PSP and actually creating data systems within the school. It's helped us better understand what's happening with our students. Rather than speaking from an anecdotal place, we actually have data to support what we're talking about. And so in some cases, some of the components, we recently built those structures, so it's going to feed into this. Other parts of it actually speak to, all of this speaks to action steps that are backing the KPIs. And I think this data is holding us accountable for actually knowing where we are with how we're engaging parents and staff. For example, one of our areas of focus is to ensure that our support staff, that they have access to professional development and professional growth. You see that area empty because we have to roll all of that out. It's holding us accountable, it's making visible the direction we're going, but also lets us know where we are in relationship to it. And so I use that as an example because there are systems that we're still building, even though we've spent a lot of time in the past few years building some internal systems that will feed into this.
And so we may see different measures as you guys build more standardized reporting. We may see things come onto the dashboard that you think are worth adding.
Yes, but we'll only add them with a conversation. For example, we're using the CSCI for a lot of our culture and climate data. We're still trying to figure out if that's the best indicator for us, if what it's telling, we were trying to understand what it's actually telling us. And so as we live this, within the next year or so, we'll come back and possibly say we need a better indicator because this isn't really telling us what we're hearing or what we're experiencing in the building.
And it's very
Not
static.
matching.
That was the other thing. I mean,
Right.
I know, for instance, with extracurriculars, engagement serves a number of functional purposes, one of which is social-emotional wellness. But the one thing I was looking at here, and it's a very difficult thing to measure, and I know in some ways it's kind of the gold standard is figuring out how to measure that in real time, and the CSCI is very static.
One of the things we're implementing this year is an SEL survey that will go out to all of our freshmen. We're going to be piloting that, and so eventually that might end up on the dashboard, but we're testing it out. If it works and it's actually informing us of the overall well-being of our students, we'll consider rolling that out across all of the grade levels and possibly figuring out whether we're going to embed that or not in our PSP.
You know, one of our most challenging milestones is that all students will grow academically, socially, and emotionally. And trying to figure out how to measure social and emotional growth is, that's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow for districts, frankly, is, you know, how on earth do you do that? And we tried to find one and ultimately wound up deciding that we need to create one on our own in partnership with ECRA. And that's the survey that we'll be implementing this year. And again, it'll be an iterative step, but we haven't found anything that would be better than what we might be able to create.
Mike, is this somewhere right now that people could access it, or is this still kind of being developed?
Currently, it's in development, and so we wanted to run it by all of you first before we went live. There are parts of the data that are already put in. The graduation data, for example, that's current data. There are other parts that are still in development, so we didn't want to release it to the public until we'd shown it to you.
I think what you sent us was just maybe a PDF. I mean, is there something where we could at least see how to drill down?
Absolutely, yeah. I will send you
I
the
don't know if
link
that's what
after
you
the
were asking,
meeting,
but-
and you can
Yeah.
look around within the product.
I think that's a good, this is really a very high level, looks more like an infographic to me. I think I shared that with you, but if you give us the ability to drill down and do comparatives, I think it would be really helpful. And then we could decide on 7 or 9 or 3 or, you know, as a group.
Right.
As time goes on after you guys put more work into it.
Great.
Are you planning to put benchmarks in for these numbers? I mean, 3.86, really know what the survey was, and, it's not a very meaningful number like that,
Yeah,
so.
for each of these, I mean, it's how the board wants it to look. We expect to have, this is the current status and this is our target. And the elementary, for example, did choose the red, yellow, green to indicate that we're progressing towards something. So where is it that we currently are? We can put historical data on there, for example, as well. Is that?
No, I meant benchmarking against other schools, other
Oh,
districts.
that.
State, whatever, that's how the state report cards look, your school
Right.
versus the state, and I think
Yeah.
people are accustomed to seeing some comparator like that.
Many of the things on here, like our level of extracurricular, our ability to gather that data from other districts is not available. Where it is available, we have not considered that, but that will be one of the things that we'll look at following this meeting. A graduation rate, for example, we could certainly benchmark to other districts on that. That would be readily available. Attendance, SAT meets, and so on. You could probably do that, yeah?
I actually don't know, I don't necessarily think this is appropriate to benchmark against other districts. We have our own milestones, our own vision and mission, and not everyone is at the same place we are with some of these things. For things like attendance and things that are on our school report cards, we can look up other districts. I think for ourselves, we have to determine, base all of this information on our own values. I think oftentimes we get caught up in looking at everyone else and we lose sight of the work that we have in front of us. It's not to say that we shouldn't understand the entire landscape, but I do think that our priorities speak to our values as a district, and that should be where we start.
Okay, good. All right, thank you.
Is that the end of your superintendent's report, Mike?
That completes the superintendent's report.
So are there any members of the public who would like to address the board? So step to the podium. I'm sorry to give ground rules, but if you could just state your name before you speak, and then please understand the fact that we don't respond to questions doesn't mean we're not interested or we're not listening. This is our meeting and our time to listen and learn. So we won't be replying to what you say, but we do take everything that everybody says very seriously. And again, if there are other speakers, I hope I don't have to do this. If you start to say the same thing, just to keep us moving along, I may end the public comment. But
Okay.
And just
thank
one
you.
other thing, I'm sorry, before you get started, everybody standing in the back, there's plenty of seats over here, and there's more seats in this back room if you want to pull them out, or you can continue to stand back there.
Good evening. My name is Bridget Mobile. I am the elected union president of the Lake Forest High School Support Staff Association, which represents 115 of the district employees. I am here tonight to inform not only the school board, but the community about the frustrations we are facing during the current contract negotiations with the Board of Education's chosen negotiation committee. Before I go into specifics, I think it's important for all of you to understand how our organization came to be. About a year ago, a few coworkers started a conversation around forming a union, and most of us felt that we would be alone in our thinking. We quickly found we were definitely not alone. Instead, we found an overwhelming amount of support throughout both district buildings. Many have asked how the union was formed so quickly. The answer is quite easy. The historically poor treatment of your support staff made this an easy conversation to gather around. We realized that we needed a collective voice and a seat at the table. We know that we are now stronger, united as one. The Board of Education has historically approved the balancing of the school's budget on the lowest paid employees, the support staff. Currently, your committee is pushing for half of our members to forgo any increase in pay, and at the same time pay significantly more for their health insurance. We know the district has the funds to meet our request without affecting the community's taxes. We feel our proposals have been fair requests after many years of inadequate pay to our members. This is a living wage issue. More than a third of our members make less than $15 an hour, and that includes staff members that have worked for the district for more than 5 to 10 years, and yet we have been told you believe they are paid adequately. We continue to lose talented staff members to our neighboring districts like New Trier, Stevenson, and Highland Park. Those districts have higher wages and better benefits for their support staff employees. We've lost almost 24 this year alone, and you are currently still struggling to fill those positions, even as our first semester is ending. Losing talented staff members who are on the front lines every day, who work with your most vulnerable students, means our students lose, our school loses, and our community loses. Our members are not just the teachers' aides, your security, your cleaning crews, lunch cashiers, student supervisors, buildings and grounds crews, or office assistants. They are your students' educators of life. They coach your sports teams, they advise your student clubs, they heal your student athletes, and they bring joy to your most vulnerable students. We wanted to bring these issues to your attention in the hopes that with your support, we can reach a contract agreement soon, one that is fair and equitable for all support staff employees. Thank you for hearing us tonight.
thank you, Bridget. Are there any other members of the public that would like to address the board?
Thomas Giuliano. I am a representative of the LFEA. I'm a lead negotiator. I've been negotiating Probably been longer than people would like me to have been negotiating. I will say this, that the support staff is critical to the functioning of Lake Forest High School. And I know, and I believe that we can create a fair and equitable contract soon. I know we're going to be starting up our negotiations soon as well. And if they're taken care of, I know that our negotiations will probably go a little bit easier as well. So please heed what we're saying here today. Please give them what they need to help the school and to help the students at Lake Forest High School and to just make a better working environment. Thank you.
Anyone else like to address the board? Okay, we're going to move on to the reports section of our meeting. We have the assessment report. Alan?
Make sure you don't have to turn on just AV mute. There you go.
Thanks, bud.
Taking care of you here.
I thought they were all here to hear me speak. Right? You guys. I know all you guys. Where are you going?
Before Alan begins, I want to preface some of the comments with, I've asked Alan to present us with his critical takeaways and to keep this portion of the presentation relatively brief. Within the board packet, there's a much more discursive assessment report, and I also wanted to make sure we had plenty of time for questions. So with that, Dr. Waller.
Thank you. I was definitely asked this year to kind of change visually what I presented. In the last 2 years, maybe 20 slides on a report, but then narrowing it down to say 4 to 5 to 6 slides for this presentation. Today, all I have is just this one slide, and then I'm going to go ahead and elaborate. You have your board reports. I also got some great follow-up questions last week from Reese through Eileen to me, and I tried to present you with some follow-up data, hopefully that you got. I think it was requested on Wednesday, and I sent it back to you on Thursday. So I'll address a couple of those things as well. So in trying to be succinct and honor everyone's time, and also happy to come back or do follow-up with the board if there's further data that you want or want me to dig deeper. So regarding ACT and SAT, I want to just highlight one of the things about the ACT. You were able to see on the report that I provided that the April 2018 composite score was a 27.1, which was the highest that we've ever recorded, first time over a 27 for a composite. And one of the things that I wanted to point out to you is, real quickly, when I first saw that, one of my first things that I was thinking about and debating with Thor Benson about, who was helping me kind of cull and disaggregate this data, was it's easy to think as the state has gone to the SAT suite that fewer students in our community are taking the ACT, right? Which would then mean the ones that are taking it are the ones who really want to take it versus those who just take it because it's on maybe the April testing day. We only found, if you looked at the notes I provided on that slide, we only found 19 fewer students took the ACT, juniors, than the SAT. So that really speaks to the commitment that our community still has to the ACT as a viable assessment, and yet our score went up 0.8. So that is impressive to acknowledge. The other thing that blew my mind, and it was Shayla that actually unearthed this, 2 years ago, about 134,000 students took the ACT in the state of Illinois. Last year was 62,000, so it was cut in half. And yet we had 19 fewer of the capable students, juniors, taking it. So we have a different trend right now than what the state is saying. Many students in many communities and many districts, they take the test that's given on the April testing day, and yet we have students who still commit to taking the ACT. So I think that that's important to go ahead and acknowledge. Regarding the SAT, You know, it is definitely an assessment that our district and our community is still adjusting to. I've been in many places and spaces with counselors, people from educational services, presentations to families and to students even. And there's definitely, again, that adjustment period between moving away from the ACT and towards the SAT, but that may not happen. It's just kind of what's happened more in other districts or communities. And so I think that's important to bring up. The one thing I wanted to mention also was there is a slide in there that shows where we rank on SAT performance, and it shows what our number is. And in going and looking a little bit deeper at that, one of the things I wanted to just bring up is the fact that when you would look at where we would be ranked on the composite ACT, say 6 years ago, 8 years ago, those type of reports that come out from like the Tribune or the Sun-Times, they would be who would publish those reports. That's how we would see how we did compared to other, neighboring districts. Those reports that we would see would be the students' last ACT that they took in that given year, okay? So if Johnny takes it in April, let's say 5 years ago, takes the ACT in April, but then he decides he doesn't like his score and he wants to take it again in June, that's the score that got reported that put us where our ranking was. The SAT that you saw, the performance rankings, all that takes the scores from the April testing day. You cannot say this with fidelity. I cannot say this 110%, but we do know that many students who take a standardized test again or again tend to score higher. That doesn't mean they always do, for certain, but that is just something to take into consideration. So I wanted to kind of bring that up. The other thing, too, is our benchmark, and a benchmark is obviously, it's defined as a student being able to have success at the next level, getting an A, B, or C in a course, typically a 101 course of comparative skills. And we saw our benchmark rates for the PSAT 9, 10, and SAT anywhere between 92 and 90% for our students. So we are still doing great things with them. I think there's tons and tons of work to be done around this in terms of the skills that the ACT and the SAT measure. And there's always a real balancing act between trying to figure out how those, and I've used this term last year, I'm sorry, but it's how you marry content and skills. It's not one or the other, it's how they work in concert with one another. And so there's that challenge and that stuff that we're still looking at. And I'm going to just address that at the very end of my report as well, because there's some work we're looking towards. I wanted to also talk a little bit about AP and some of just what we've done around AP. Having come to this district just over 2.5 years ago, I'm used to being in other districts and other places and spaces where, when there's that trend to encourage more students to access AP courses, to access AP exams, sometimes it's met with a question on whether or not students can succeed. And some of the follow-up data I provided you with last Thursday really speaks to whether we've seen enrollment dip or kind of flatline. We continue to see that pass rate remain above whatever happens to enrollment. And that is a testament to showing that we believe, and I really believe it's a mindset. In my short time I've been here, I see that among our faculty and staff and families, and believing that our students, all of our students, can succeed. And I have conversations with people all the time about what a student does, that if they get a 2 and they really challenge themselves, does that mean they succeeded? And I always stand before you and I say absolutely yes. A success for some students might be a 5, some it might be a 3, some it might be taking the course. And so that's the other thing I wanted to just bring up, was that was another data point that you asked. Was we had provided in the initial report what the percentage was of students who had taken and passed the AP exam. But what you asked for, which was valuable data that I should have had in the initial report, was how about students accessing the course, taking the course? And as you can see, we have a surge in 5 years from 29% to 44%. And so, do I think we're done? Nope, and I told you that same thing last year, but I am proud of the fact that we have seen that gain to where 44% of our students have taken an AP course in 2018, in the 17-18 school year. So that is something that I think is worth mentioning and acknowledging. I also think I had another slide in the report that speaks to our students who have IEPs or 504s and the levels of success that they have when they access the supports made available to them and they take an AP course. They too have success. And Shayla talked earlier about building systems and having systems in place so that when students struggle or when students have something that they want to follow up with their teacher, having those opportunities is incredibly important. The third point talks about college readiness indicators. And I said in here, you can see that there's really a myriad of ways to measure whether or not someone is ready for life after Lake Forest High School. I'm really grateful that with ESSA and the connection between ESSA and our college readiness indicators, that we're kind of looking a little bit more at what it means to say a student is in fact college ready. And a major indicator, according to ESSA, is always that GPA. 3.0 on a 5.0 or a 3.5 or on a 5.5, excuse me, a 3.0 on a 4.0 or a 3.5 on a 5.0 scale. Excuse me, but that is just one indicator. There's three other indicators that are important to just be mindful of. One is we talked about getting a 3 or higher on an AP exam, or a student could get an A, B, or C in an AP class. And then the third point that is becoming increasingly a part of our conversation is that they get an A, B, or C in a dual credit course. And that is definitely something that we're trending towards. And it's something that as I go to CADCA meetings, the Chicago area directors of curriculum assessment, we have a lot of work to do around when and where and how we would offer dual credit, and we're going to do it the right way, and we're going to do it so that it fits the needs of our students and our community. It doesn't make sense to try to provide dual credit opportunities where they don't fit for our students. But we, for example, for next year, have 2 new dual credit additions that we're going to be providing for our students. One around dual credit Spanish, which would be the equivalent of a 232 level Spanish course at a college. Similarly, dual credit accounting. We have a very rigorous honors accounting course at Lake Forest High School. These kids are going on to being in finance, accounting, business administration majors. And we look at something like that and say, if the student's doing the rigor, how do we not consider giving them a dual credit opportunity? And so we're going to be looking about partnerships around that. And then we already have our new media. So we will build this over time. But I bring it up only now because there are a variety of ways that you could say that a student could be college ready in terms of those academic indicators that I'm speaking of. Finally, the last thing I just want to bring up is circling back a little bit to curriculum instruction and teaching and learning. I always have interesting conversations with people regarding my role and my title as Director of Teaching and Learning around standardized assessments, because sometimes I'll receive pushback regarding standardized tests and their value and their merit and what they do for us and what they tell us. And it was alluded to in Risa's opening remarks just about how they help our students go to that next level. But at the end of the day, I really believe that they can tell us a lot about our instruction. I really do. And the skills that are measured, you could talk about problem solving, critical thinking, critical reading, critical writing. You could talk about inquiry-based analysis. All these different types of skills that students need to go to the next level, those skills, the vast majority of them, they do manifest themselves in various standardized assessments. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And so if we're able to take a look at our curriculum, if we're able to take a look at our instruction and look at how, based on standardized test data, we can respond, that's going to help us help our students. We're also kind of engaged, or beginning to be engaged, in some work around assessment literacy. And what I mean by that is our leadership team, our instructional leadership team, headed by Shayla and myself, have really felt like we need to take a deeper look with our faculty and our administration and our staff around what it is we do to identify learning targets for our students and to make sure that our assessments mirror those learning targets and to make sure that we have the proper supports in place for our students as they're trying to be successful on those assessments. And this could be another hour-long presentation that I don't have time for, but there's so many layers of what it means to be truly literate regarding assessments and what they measure and how we measure students' learning. And so we want to be able to continue to think differently about how we can measure student learning. And that's going to be the crux of our work in the next couple of years for sure. That's what I have. Follow-up questions?
Yeah, just one question. Just one question. With the ACT, SAT, with the state trending towards the SAT, what are colleges? Because ultimately, I think the ACT and SAT are for college admissions. How do colleges look at the difference between the two?
It's a great question. So one of the things that's really important to highlight, first of all, is just that when the state went to the SAT, College Board had kind of pivoted and changed what the SAT looked like. So it's more similar to the ACT than it used to be, but never confuse that with being the same as the ACT, because they're not. They're not similar tests. And so colleges or universities, depending on what they're looking for in their students, might ask for one assessment versus the other. But I can't speak in my role to that a college would have a specific reason for requiring one over the other. Many colleges, most colleges, accept one or the other. And what do students do? They tend to send their score that they see as the better score between the two tests. Excuse me, I had a 45-minute conversation with a parent today who was talking about letting their students take each test this fall, cold turkey is what the mom called it, and then would get them the necessary exposure that they need to be able to do well, and then see which one they end up doing better on in the spring of 2019. So a lot of it varies on which assessment families think their child will do better on.
To answer, colleges will accept either one. They're not that much different, but they assess students differently. So writing is assessed differently, science is assessed differently. So, but across the board, colleges will accept either one. And part of the conversation, the national conversation, is colleges moving away from focusing on ACT and SAT scores altogether.
The main indicator at CADCA that we talk about all the time is that one of the most valuable indicators for students, two of them are their GPA, but also their ability to be resilient and stay in rigorous courses. We talk about that over and over again. There are trends of many high-achieving colleges not asking for either anymore, as Shayla has said.
Alan, I have a question. On the last bullet point on your slide, you have fall D2007 work, D115 work. What does that mean?
Thank you, Lisa. I know. Thank you so much. So this last fall, I basically went to my boss and said, I want to expose my instructional leadership team to really a common experience. What we lacked as an instructional leadership team was a common experience around what assessment literacy looked like. And Maine District 207 does a 3-day PD on that, and so we all went. And so we did that work. Bless you. Man, sorry, I apologize.
So, the AP trends are fantastic. It's been great to watch that develop over the last few years. And the dual credit, which I first learned about in our education committee, I think is a terrific advance and no doubt will be very advantageous for our students, both of those for college readiness. I was concerned, though, in this data set about the SAT results. And I appreciate that standardized tests are not necessarily the best measure of college readiness or even the effectiveness of our curriculum. However, when we are considerably below many of our peer districts, that is a point of concern, because I think we have thought of Lake Forest High School as one of the best districts in the state. And also along that line, and that is a very apples to apples test. It's now the state mandated test, and so all students are taking it on the same date across the state. And so if our students aren't doing as well, it tells us apples to apples, there's something going on in the school. Secondly, these data on the PSATs, which students take different versions of in 9th, 10th grade, we also see that their composite rank is declining progressively from 9th to 10th to 11th grade. So we're going, from 90th percentile to 80th percentile over that period of time in both English and math. And this is, again, very concerning. So just wondering how the teaching and learning side is planning to address this.
No, thank you, and I appreciate that. That's a good question. So I can't kick this cough. Sorry. First of all, the one thing to be mindful of is the percentiles that you see are heterogeneous groups of students. So they're not the same kids. So next year we'll have a full longitudinal sequence of kids for 4 years where we can track how they've grown. But right now what we're looking at is different groups of students, not the same groups of students. So I want to really have us, really caution us to look at that, to really look at how we're growing students. But to directly address what you're talking about, we need to continue to unearth, to uncover the types of skills that show up on those assessments and try to be more explicit in our instruction with them. So an example I will give you is when you look at the evidence-based reading and writing part, and there's the ELA, like the language arts part, the reading for information part. They have different parts of like grammar, composition, meaning of words. Kristen Carlson is already working around how those type of skills are going to more explicitly show up in English 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so that really has to be the heart of your work. The same is true in mathematics. The same is true in the writing. And so our students tend to do really well in writing. There's a lot of explicit writing around, explicit instruction around argumentative writing in our school. And so students get really good at honing their craft on that because, for example, what you think about, it's not important to assign writing. It's important to give feedback on writing. And that makes a difference. And like our English teachers are committed to that. So that's an important thing. So, I mean, to answer your question as directly as I can, Lisa, it's got to be that explicit instruction around those skills. And that's stuff that we're working on. And when you look at the assessment literacy part, what I have there beneath at the very end, it's identifying those skills and then walking through what our learning targets are, and then looking at our assessments and see, do those learning targets truly represent the skills that we value and that have merit, and then do our assessments reflect those? And that is a long, arduous process, and it's a collective effort. The real power rests in course-alike teams. That's where the power rests. When one teacher does one thing their way to meet the needs of their kids, that only affects the kids that they teach. When 3, 4 teachers work together collaboratively to improve instruction, that has an impact. That can have an impact on an entire grade. So there's a lot of power in that, and we have a lot of work to continue to do with that. And we have the IDs and the faculty committed to doing it.
I do have one comment to make, and I've had several conversations just around when scores or rankings, all of those things get posted. It's important to note on the SAT Suite slide that a lot of information that gets sent out is around average scale scores rather than the percent of students or the number of students who are proficient. And so on the SAT Suite slide, I do think it's important to look at how many of our students are meeting or exceeding our benchmarks or are proficient, something that Chicago Tribune or reports don't show actually how many kids are meeting your benchmarks and your expectations. Schools have a variety of number of kids there and all of those things, so it's easy to look at those ranks. I'm not saying that we shouldn't pay attention, but our focus As Mike mentioned earlier, we look at attainment, but right now we're hyper-focused and zoned in on growth and how many kids are where we expect them to be and continuing to grow. The other thing that I want to mention, just so you all know, the Chicago Tribune and other newspaper outlets have stopped creating those reports as much. You might see them on some of the ranking organizations and all of those things, but earlier we've looked through all of the reports over the years, and the one that was created and the one that's in the packet of the top SAT performance, that was actually created. It wasn't created by the Chicago Tribune or the Sun-Times. That was created in-house. We pulled the top 50 or the 50 schools that are typically ranked and actually looked up each of those scores just to give some insight. And again, a lot of that, as you see with the composite, is the average scale score. And so I just wanted to mention, this didn't come from an outside outlet. We looked those up just to see how things are playing out.
As I mentioned to Mike when I saw this, I think it'd be very valuable for the board to see some time trends in our relative performance compared to other schools over time, just to, to figure out how we're doing, because we're making a lot of improvements. It would be nice to see that. I realize the problem with ranking, and we get into this whole status thing, but it's the best thing the board has of judging how we're doing, compared to districts that are spending similar amounts on their students.
So I took some time and read back earlier today all of our assessment reports, even prior to when I was here. And you'll see it ebb and flow, which outlet is putting out this information, and it's all primarily focused on the ACT. Inside of the assessment report, you will see that our ACT scores continue to grow and continue to improve. We have to remember that it's just been 2 years that our state officially adopted the SAT. At the same time, our district decided to go with the SAT for our growth model. As Alan mentioned, we are still at the final phases of actually having an entire cohort for the first time go through to give us the KPI that connects to our growth indicators. So as a district, we're still getting used to and still learning from the SAT suite. And so that information has not been reported on because it was never a requirement from the state, which is why we started looking up some of this information, but we're trying to backtrack. It's not to say that other school districts didn't take the SAT, because they do, especially for national merit, but that information has not been readily accessible because on everyone's report card, it was the ACT.
So for my clarification, the SAT suite at 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, these are different cohorts, and because it's newer, we would anticipate that the freshmen who are in the 93rd percentile will stay in the 93rd percentile by the time they're juniors.
Well, that's our expectation, but without having a cohort go through. So when Mike projected the KPIs under the growth indicator, it says TBD, because we're still trying to work through our adoption of the suite.
One of the other things I wanted to mention too, with our first cohort of kids going through, is we're able to, with the SAT, drill really deeply into the sub-scores. That's not the type of data I could present in this type of setting or even report, because it really goes deep into individuals' concepts. Like when you look at mathematics, there's 5, 6, 7 different sub-scores that are measured. ERW, evidence-based reading and writing, there's 5, 6, 7 different sub-scores that are measured. And so when we look at the growth of a student, when you talk about like my role and our role in teaching and learning, when you drill deep regarding those skills, that deep, and you partner with faculty, with teachers about how they can help students grow in that area, that's where you have the real change. So the instruction changes, and the results will be there, but as Shayla said, it'll take time. But I really believe in my heart of hearts, when we can unearth that data about the same group of kids regarding the same skills over 4 years of time, It's going to tell us so much more than if I'm looking at this group of kids over here and then looking at this group of kids over here who had different experiences regarding their learning.
I like what you're saying. It makes sense to me. I think you're on the right track, and I appreciate the steps you know you need to take to get the curriculum going there. So that's great. And I also I really do like the SAT suite, and I look forward to seeing the first full group of children that go from all the grades. You see their development. So again, I commend you. I think you're doing the right stuff. I like this direction we're going, and I think it's going to be good for us. I would ask, I do like the PowerPoints though. Next time it's minor, I would like to see when he's talking about data to have it up here, because for all the people who do show up, and even, I mean, I've got most of it here, but I'm just, Mike, asking you, when we get the presentations, if I can get the PowerPoints up there, I'd really appreciate it. But thank you for presenting. This is really good.
Thank you. I apologize for the cough.
No, I'm not done. I'm not done with you, Alan.
Oh, I thought you were.
No.
Sorry.
What would be helpful to me, I mean, we understand the rankings, we understand how the scores comp, and I appreciate the update. But when you mentioned, I'd like to know what you learned and what you're going to do differently. So you mentioned one thing. You said we want to be more explicit in our instruction of the skills, because those are the skills that colleges are telling us that they need, and those are important. So it would be helpful for us, I think, or at least for me. I won't be here next year, but this is what we learned from these test scores. This is what we're doing differently, and this is what happened. And even if you said, this is what we're doing differently and it didn't work, or this is how we changed some instructional methods or common assessments and it didn't work, so we're going to try something different. But that's where I think the benefit is from all these test scores and drilling down and what did you learn? I mean, we can compare ourselves to Stevenson and Deerfield and New Trier till the cows come home, and so what? But all the things that you guys have been telling us for years about individualized instruction, support, challenge, it's resonating. We hear you, but it would be helpful to tie these assessments to what you're doing and what works.
Absolutely. I appreciate the feedback. Will do.
Okay. Thank you, Alan.
Okay, thank you.
Hot tea, lemon.
A lot of it.
Okay, next are committee reports. Education Committee, Lisa, I know you all are meeting tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow, bright and early, 7:30, I'm really looking forward to our deep dive on the math analysis with ECRA leading the way, Dr. Helen.
Thank you. Diana, is there anything to report on boosters, APT?
Sure, always. The foundation did not have a meeting this November, but they wanted to let everybody know that their ornament sale is extended to December 15th. It's a personalized Lake Forest building on the ornament, and you can put the year your child graduated, so you can personalize it to your child or your child's name. And that goes until December 15th. And Donati's, they've extended their lunch or dinner promotion with Donati's. So if you don't want to cook, and you say you're with the Lake Forest High School Foundation, the foundation will receive 10% off of the total you spend. You just ordered Donati's pizza last night. No, you had to tell them. But you should order it tomorrow, or whenever this week, before the 8th. The grants are due on January 18th at 5:00 p.m., so they're encouraging everybody who might be interested in applying for a grant to get going on that, because they'd love to give some money out this year. And if you're thinking about an end-of-the-year donation for tax purposes, the foundation would love to be the recipient of your money, and Jeff Folker would love to help you with that. Their next meeting is Wednesday, December 17th at 9:15, and it will be a holiday gathering for them. There was no boosters meeting in November as well. Apparently, we decided to boycott all meetings in November, which was great for me. Their next meeting is next Monday, December 10th, and Dave and I will be attending that one. And for the APT, they met on November 7th, and kind of tying back into what Mike talked about earlier, they did a report on Career Connections, or the Open Doors program. They had a 30% increase in the student participation. So last year, they had 236 kids who went on Open Doors, and this year, 304. They had 46 firms that sold out their spots. So they had the Naval Base had some openings, and those were apparently gone before it ever opened. So they were really excited about that, and they believe they'll get some new summer internship opportunities from some of these places that the kids went to, because the companies were so impressed with our students. So another win-win. Talent show is coming up for them, and work is underway, and they're still looking for volunteers. So if anybody has some free time and wants to do that. And their next meeting is December 5th, this Wednesday, and it's a holiday party at Jenna Park's home. So lots of fun celebrating for December.
Cool. Anything on the policy committee? Did the policy committee meet last month?
Not met.
Okay. Finance and ops, David?
So quickly, my son, one of my sons went to the naval base,
good.
open doors, and loved it. That was phenomenal. I mean, he was just raving about it, telling me it was my fault I didn't talk him into doing it the year before. Thanks. It's all you. So anyway, whoever, Shayla, I mean, it was awesome. Whoever's leading that thing is great. We did not meet as a finance committee, so I have nothing to report on behalf of the finance committee right now. Jen, did you have anything you wanted to cover?
Okay, liaison reports, Edred, Sally, anything new?
Couple things. I want to follow up on two matters that were noted during the public comment section at our November board meeting by Lori Rose, who's the president of the League of Women Voters of Lake Forest and Lake Bluff. First of all, she appeared to urge the board to cast a no vote at the IASB annual conference that was going to be taking place later in November. It was on proposed resolution 2, which called for the IASB boards to support passing legislation that would provide local school boards with the option to decide if they would allow for properly trained staff to be armed in school buildings as part of the district's overall student safety and protection plans. Many of us on this board and the 67 board also received inquiries from members of the public about the resolution. Just to close the book on that, the resolution received a great deal of publicity, including media trucks, protesters, but it was not passed. The final vote was 203 to 179. The second thing that Lori did is she invited the board and the community to attend the League's November 11th program at First Presbyterian Church entitled Gun Violence Local Impact. I went. I thought it was really well done. I thought it was well organized, and it was very well attended. They had to keep pulling chairs out of storage to find seating for folks. There were 4 presenters at the program, including Dr. Ingrid Weimer, who is the Executive Director for School Services for District 67. There was a lot of information presented for us as a board and community members to think about. There are 2 takeaways I wanted to share from the program. The first was that the prevalence and threat of gun violence is present for students in our schools in ways that we didn't experience during our own school years. After detailing some well-known incidents of gun violence in our own community over the last 3 years, we learned that some students have begun to refer to themselves as the massacre generation. Dr. Colleen Cicchetti, who's the Executive Director of the Center for Childhood Resilience at Lurie Children's Hospital, spoke about how these issues can affect the emotional and mental health of our students. Turning to the issue of school safety, it was not surprising that at the annual IASB conference late in November, their 3 best attended single programs were about school safety. And turning back now to the League presentation, at her presentation, Dr. Weimer noted that 23% of mass shootings occur on school campuses. That includes colleges. She did an excellent job of describing our district's scrupulous attention to monitoring and continuously improving the safety measures in our facilities. And there were 2 things I wanted to think about. First is we do receive an annual report at this board on our school safety upgrades at the high school. And I'm looking forward to continuing that. The second is that I will be more attuned to school safety planning as part of Perkins and Will's master facility plan. Okay, other things. The Chicago teachers are planning to walk out tomorrow in what's believed to be the country's first major charter school teacher strike. Negotiations for higher wages, more resources, and smaller class sizes have hit an impasse. The charter teachers argue, in effect, that they are being treated as second tiers of professionals, and they are seeking the same wages and related terms that their counterparts in the Chicago's Teachers Union are provided. Interestingly, the Chicago's Teachers Union is representing them in the strike. What's interesting, at least in the data that they have, the union has provided to the media, is that there is no significant difference in the not-for-profit versus the for-profit operators, and they are arguing that any increased funds that come into the charter schools tend to be funneled to administrative compensation as opposed to in-classroom resources. Why does this matter to us? This strike, along with probably a dramatic reset in priorities by Governor-elect Pritzker are likely to significantly slow charter school expansion in Illinois. On November 27th, Governor-elect Pritzker announced the formation and the members of his transition's Educational Success Committee. It will be chaired by State Senator Andy, I don't know how to pronounce that, Manar, who we have seen speak many times at EdRed and IASB, along with State Representative Emmanuel Welsh, Chicago Public Schools CEO Dr. Janice Jackson, and IEA President Kathy Griffin. There are 35 additional members. I mentioned that Senator Manar is a good choice. He's very engaged, he's very well versed, and he was one of the architects of the evidence-based funding model. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. EdRed actually pointed out, Sarah Hartwig pointed out that while superintendents and teachers are very well represented on the commission, school board member representation is severely lacking. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out as well. One of the questions that Governor Pritzker has already been asked is how they're going to address the nearly $7 billion in additional funds needed to meet the state's adequacy measures, and he has said that the committee will be working on that. The veto session is now complete in Illinois. The two bills of most interest to EdRed were not brought back for potential override. Both are expected to be reintroduced next year. Specifically, the proposal for getting all Illinois teachers to a minimum wage of $40,000 over the next 3 years was not brought up for an override vote, but it had been written by Senator Manar, so I think we will see it come back next session. There was also a vote that passed, but that got vetoed by Governor Rauner, that would have required 150 minutes per week of physical education, K through 12. This was also opposed by EdRed and vetoed by Governor Rauner for things such as no provision for what happens when there are less than 5 days of school in a given week. Nobody is saying that phys ed wasn't important, but it was a relatively inflexible rule. We will see that come back next term. Two more bills of note in education that were passed as part of veto overrides was House Bill 4284 that requires that 3 members of the State Board of Education must represent the educator community, which I think is good, and House Bill 4657 creating an emotional intelligence education task force to develop assessment and curriculum guidelines on emotional intelligence and best practices on emotional intelligence and social and emotional learning. The end.
Ted, anything from NSSED?
Briefly, I guess I'll just label this the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is the NSSED Foundation is doing their fundraising this quarter for the year, and I'd like to thank everybody on the board. I think everybody contributed, so thank you for that. The bad, and it's really bad, North Shore Academy high school teacher has been arrested for pornography charges against his students. And if anybody has any information, they're supposed to contact the Glenview Police Department. But the one thing I want to bring up is a lot of the pornography, and he was also a big uploader to these dark websites. But one of the things he would do is take all the kids' phones during class, saying, everybody's got to put their phones in the box, and then he'd do the bump box where you can download all their pictures to your phone, and then he was photoshopping them to take innocent pictures and make them not so innocent pictures. So I think everybody's just got to have a conversation with their kids, just that, there's a lot of nasty stuff out there, and I'll leave it at that. And then the ugly, I've been asked to jump in the Atlantic Ocean again for Special Olympics in February, so I'll be raising money for that. So anytime you can send it to me, we won't be meeting in January, but so you're probably all going to get away with it. No, I wish. Delaware. And Sheila's old neighborhood. And that's all I have.
Okay, next up, on to the action items part of the agenda. First up is adoption of the 2018 tax levy. Any changes since last month to the estimated levy? So may I have a motion to adopt the 2018 tax levy?
I move that the Lake Forest Community High School District 115 Board of Education adopt the 2018 tax levy.
May I have a second?
Second.
Any comments, questions? May I have a roll call vote, please?
Dr. Nemekis?
Aye.
Dr. Elliott?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mrs. Kryling?
Aye.
Mr. Markison?
Aye.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
Mr. Mormon?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next up is approval of an administrator retirement agreement that we've discussed extensively in closed session. So may I have a motion to approve the administrator retirement agreement?
I move that the Lake Forest Community High School District 115 Board of Education approve the administrator retirement agreement.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second?
Any comments or questions? May I have a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Mormon?
Aye.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
Mrs. Kryling?
Aye.
Dr. Elliott?
Aye.
Mr. Markison?
Aye.
Dr. Nemekis?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next up is approval of a support staff resignation agreement that we've also discussed extensively in closed session. So may I have a motion to approve the support staff resignation agreement?
I move that the Lake Forest Community High School District 115 Board of Education approve the support staff resignation agreement.
May I have a second?
Second.
Any comments or thoughts or questions? May I have a roll call vote, please?
Mrs. Kryling?
Aye.
Mr. Mormon?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Markison?
Aye.
Dr. Elliott?
Aye.
Dr. Nemekis?
Aye.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next up is approval of the Deputy Superintendent Shared Services Multi-Year Enabling Agreement with Rebecca Jenkins. I would like to make a motion to approve the Deputy Superintendent Multi-Year Enabling Agreement. May I have a second?
Second.
Any comments, questions?
Boy, do we think Rebecca's awesome.
Me too. Thank you. May I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
Dr. Nemekis?
Aye.
Mr. Markison?
Aye.
Mrs. Kryling?
Aye.
Mr. Mormon?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Dr. Elliott?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next up is approval of the 2019-2020 revised school calendar. So what's changed? What's different? Why is it revised?
The state made some changes in how they constitute school, how they call school days, and Shelley, if you want to talk through some of the particulars they're requiring 176 days of attendance, and we had some adjustments to make. So go ahead. Anything to add to that?
No, I think it says it in a memo. They are requiring all districts to have a minimum of 176 student attendance days. We had 175 planned for last year, and that was an approved amount for last year. But this is a recent change that all districts were just notified of. And the state has even the calendar portal down right now because they're trying to reconfigure everything for all of the districts to make adjustments right now to their new memo that just went out. So we will be adjusting our calendar, so it does impact our start date for next year. Just to note that we will have a full day of school on, I don't have it in front of me, August
23rd, I believe.
23rd, it's a Friday. The day before will continue to be freshman orientation. One of the changes that we proposed for next year was to have 3 institute days up front, and this would allow the freshmen our teachers to get prepared and the freshmen to have a full day with all of us for the most part. And so this change means we're starting on a Friday. Everyone will have a complete full day, and then we'll start a full school week the next week. So it's not necessarily a bad thing either with that schedule.
Thank you. So may I have a motion to approve the 2019-2020 revised school calendar?
I move that the Lake Forest Community High School District 115 Board of Education approve the 2019-2020 revised school calendar.
May I have a second?
Second?
Any other comments, questions? May I have a roll call vote, please?
Dr. Nemekis?
Aye.
Dr. Elliott?
Aye.
Mrs. Kryling?
Aye.
Mr. Mormon?
Aye.
Mr. Markison?
Aye.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next up is approval of our Human Resources Report. May I have a motion to approve the Human Resources Report as presented?
I move that the Lake Forest Community High School District 115 Board of Education approve the Human Resources Report as presented.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Comments, questions? I had one. It's more of a comment on when we do shared services, and I understand there's been some Q&A back and forth before the meeting about, I can't find the one position that is 70/30.
Oh, yeah.
The data administrator.
Julie.
So I understand that, 67 has somebody that almost does this full-time, and we use this person 70/30, but the deal was, and we could talk to 67 about this, but most everything should be 50/50. That's the way I thought we always did shared services, unless someone actually worked 28 hours a week on one thing, or in 12 hours a week on another thing. I thought everybody was 50/50.
The central office administration, so the senior administration, they've all been 50/50, and the farther we go away from the district leadership, the more likely it is that we're going to have a more blended
How many
approach.
67 more than 50/50 employees are there?
I'm thinking of our maintenance folks. We've got some, the grounds folks.
Those more. So there are not. But
Yeah,
I
this.
don't see how you determine someone on a. I mean, the idea of shared services, to me, we have some employees that are shared services. They're working on both districts. 70/30 is arbitrary. 115 already pays 100% of this building. I know there's some benefits, but it's not a lot of money, but I think it is something that I think is consistent with the theory and principle and understanding of shared services.
Yeah, this one was 100% 115 before, and then shifted to 30% 67.
If they're using them, it should be 50/50.
Yeah.
That's my
Should we come back to that particular position, and after having seen the examples of the positions that aren't 50/50, specifics, as opposed to just a few, so that we can better understand that?
I'm not sure.
Does 67 pay half the salary?
67, yeah, 67 would be 30.
I mean, part of the reason it's probably asking is too, one of the roles we just approved had that conversation. And we agreed on 50/50 because we're like, well, it's just the way we should do it, even though we're not a 50/50 user.
So I have a different point of view, at least with respect to this position. One of the things that we got in response to the question from Jordan Salas was a pretty detailed description of the due diligence that he did to track hours and to use data to determine how that split should work. I don't think I'm philosophically opposed to there being differences in how the allocation occurs, provided they're data-driven, and we continue to monitor that. Reese raises a different question, which is whether or not that's permitted under the Joint Shared Services Agreement. I don't think I'm philosophically opposed, but I suppose the question here is how do we land this? What do we want to do next?
He's not asking if it's permitted. The fact is, he learned that it happens. In conversations in the past 6 months about different positions, we've stated knowingly that different positions have different amounts of their time applied to each of the different districts. And in those conversations, we decided to make it 50/50 because it's in the spirit of the shared services agreement. Okay. And so it's just, what I think this calls into question is just a clear understanding and a policy. Because in those conversations, it wasn't clear to us that everything is not 50/50. So, in fact, Jordan's good work calls into question, well, wait a second, we should look at all of it or none of it. So my request is, given this, I think it would be interesting to see, maybe it's 3 roles, 4 roles, what have you. I can't remember. And so if it's possible, I suggest we should look at it. And again, I think you were in some of the conversations, but not all of them. And that's why that's why I think for Reese and I know what he's talking about.
Yeah, I would, as Sally had mentioned, how do we land this thing? I would suggest the following. This is a great topic for a JSSC meeting, very frankly. And for this position, just because what the board is approving here is that that we hire somebody to do this work. How it gets paid, we can rectify that down the road. Okay. We want to get the person in place and then get on with the work, and then we can
Shot at amending the motion just to keep us moving. May I have a motion to approve the Human Resources Report as presented to hire the, what's the title of the
K-12 data administrator.
The K through 12 data administrator, and the split of salary cost TBD.
Second.
Okay. You okay with that? May I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Mormon?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Dr. Nemekis?
Aye.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
Dr. Elliott?
Aye.
Mr. Markison?
Aye.
Mrs. Carling?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, next up is the consent agenda. I'll remind everybody that any item can be removed at the request of any board member. So may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda items, including approval of disbursements, payrolls, and financial statements for October 2018, minutes of, excuse me, of a regular meeting and workshop from November 5th, 2018, minutes of an exec session from November 5th, 2018, and disposal of audio recordings from January 9th, 2017. May I have a motion, please?
I move that the Lake Forest Community High School District 115 Board of Education approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Any questions, comments? May I have a roll call vote, please?
Mrs. Carling?
Aye.
Mr. Mormon?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Markison?
Aye.
Dr. Elliott?
Aye.
Dr. Nemekis?
Aye.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you. There were no FOIA requests this month. Few announcements that I think JD or Shayla mentioned. December 9th is our holiday concert and spaghetti dinner in the cafeteria in the RMA at 3 p.m. December 17th and the 20th is our first attempt at semester finals pre-holiday break. The 21st is a faculty workshop, no school for students. Winter break is Christmas Eve, December 24th through January 4th. School resumes on Monday, January 7th, and there is no school on January 18th. Martin Luther King Day is also a no school day on Monday, January 21st, and the second semester begins on January 22nd. We don't have a meeting next January, or in January, and our next meeting is Monday, February 11th, right here, 7 p.m. in the West Campus boardroom. May I have a motion to adjourn the Lake Forest Community High School?
Can I just say one quick thing? I had the opportunity to see the bel canto singers and the madrigals last night, and it was actually phenomenal, so I'm really looking forward. And I think if you can pass on, they were really outstanding. It was a lot of fun to see them. They did a wonderful job.
Pass, they are amazing. It was very impressive. Just the costuming is pretty impressive. That's right.
And now I'll move to adjourn.
Thank you. May I have a second? All in favor? Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.